who've been called through the open call for 21st Century Teachers call. And we'll be distributing the financial aid for alphabets A to H. It is today from 3 to 4:30 in Pearl 1. And for alphabets I to Z, it's from 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. tomorrow. So I repeat, for teachers who've been called through the open call for 21st Century Teachers, will get the financial aid today and tomorrow. For alphabets A to H, names starting with alphabet A to H, it's today 3 to 4:30 p.m. And for alphabets I to Z, it's from 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you. So we now move ahead to the disruptor panel discussion. And by its very name, it's kind of going to throw all of us out of our comfortable zone. And for that, I call upon the moderator of the session, UNESCO MGIP Director, Dr. Ananta Duriyappa, on stage. And I would welcome him with a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Renuka. We have had varying levels of success with this disruptor panel. My experience is that we haven't really been disruptive in the last 2 years. And I'm hoping that this year we'll be a lot more disruptive. And I think we have chosen the panelists accordingly, that even during lunchtime when we were having a chat, I had to kind of push them apart because they were already putting on their sparring gloves. So I'm hoping that they will continue with that friendly and kind sparring. I want to first invite Kimberly to this podium, to the stage. Kimberly is an applied developmental psychologist and a professor in human development, learning, and culture in the Department of Education and Counseling, Psychology at the University of British Columbia in Canada.
It's not me, so am I going to be Maurice?
I can't see any of the organizers here. They've all run away. That's the problem when you have staff who don't listen to you. I've been trying over the last 5 years, it just doesn't seem to work. If somebody could replace that with Kimberly. All right, okay. So Kimberly has been a good friend of the Institute. I hope I can still say that after that mishap with the names. But she works a lot on social and emotional learning. She's one of the bigger pioneers in the field, has worked a lot with students, has been a major driver in policy change in British Columbia in terms of mainstreaming SEL. So she comes with a lot of experience in that field. Next is Olivia Cruz. Olivia is from France. He's got a scientific background. We won't hold it against him. He's got a master's degree and he's an IT engineer. Olivia has an interesting background in a sense. He kind of is involved in this, I would say, an experiment still called Equal 42. And it was founded by Xavier Niel, a French telecom tycoon, and he'll talk a little bit about that model that they use. And it's a revolutionary model in a way, and I'm hoping that those ideas are going to steer a really interesting discussion among the panelists. Next, I would like to introduce Stuart McNaughton, who is having such a great time in lunch, he has forgotten that he has to be on the disruptor panel. That's the problem having a New Zealander with 4 million people with 40 million sheep. I think he's gone herding his sheep. If somebody can find Stuart, yeah, just look where the sheep are, and then he must probably find him around. So let me invite to the stage our last panelist, Evan Leo. Evan Leo is the General Manager of Campus Business Operations of Squirrel AI Learning Partner. Yvonne has an MBA from Stanford University. We want to hold it against her as well. She served as a training instructor to the top management of the Only Education Group, expert advisor of the early childhood in Johor, Malaysia, and the consultant of the Buddhist organization at Liangjiao Mountain in Taiwan. So she's got a really interesting affiliations. Squirrel is an interesting company that, and maybe she'll tell us a little bit why it's called Squirrel, because I'm intrigued. But they have done some really path-breaking work on AI and individualized learning. And I came across an article recently on talking a little bit about what they do, especially when UNESCO held its artificial intelligence conference in Beijing earlier this year. And they demonstrated how interventions, using AI interventions to children as they were facing difficulties. So we hope we will hear a little bit about the work that they do. And I still can't find Stuart. I think we're going to start because we are on a time, I want to finish this by 3 o'clock. All right. So let's start off by using what we heard from the children this morning. I think that's a great starting point, because when they mentioned a number of things that they were hoping and expecting from the education system, there was a lot of applause from the participants. So it seems like, yes, you agree with that. And some of the words that we heard, Stuart is here. How are the sheep? Are they okay?
They're not sheep, they're okay.
They're okay, okay, good. So Stuart is a professor of education at the University of Auckland. He comes from New Zealand, as you would have figured when I kept talking about sheep. And he's the director of the Wolf Research Center. And I'm not going to pronounce that. I believe it's a Maori pronunciation. Putahai wakatai ranga hapori ako angitu. Yeah. I'll show you my New Zealand Maori tattoos.
Yes, I saw them.
Once we'll talk about tattoos later. He's the chief scientist to the education ministry in New Zealand. And I thought that was interesting that they have a chief scientist, because I find that in education, it seems like they're aversive to science. And New Zealand it seemed to be very progressive with its scientific advisors. So that seems to be there's hope. So back to Stuart, we were sort of saying we'll use as a platform to move from is what we heard from the children this morning. Some of the key words that they talked about was interactive. They wanted a lot more interactive. One of the key words that they used and everybody clapped was boring. They found school and classrooms extremely boring. They wanted something more exciting, and I think the interactiveness was that was the suggestion. They wanted shorter periods. I'm not sure what when I was at school, it was about 40 minutes to 50 minutes a period. I think it's roughly about the same. I think they wanted a 20-minute period, which I found interesting that it kind of coincides with psychology, which says their attention span is about 20 minutes. So they seem to have got it right, where psychologists would have spent 20 years coming up with that 20-minute rule. So just go and listen to the children. I had the discussion about whiteboards, but it was actually more in terms of colors. They wanted to have more colors, and I think that's the learning environment issue that they were talking about. Play was a big term that they wanted to keep talking about play. And then the one that my favorite was the continuous assessment. They just don't want this one-time big exams where they have to memorize, and in fact it becomes a game of how to pass an exam rather than about the learning that you're going to be assessed by. And my favorite was nicer and kinder teachers. Can I see a show of hands of teachers in this audience? Oh, a lot of them. A lot of them on this side. So I got to be very careful about what I talk about teachers, sort of knowing that things might come flying from my right-hand side. So I'll pay attention to the right-hand side. So nicer and kinder teachers, don't get angry when we get things wrong, was what one of the terms. So based on that, as our departure point, I want to first start with Olivier, is to talk a little bit about School 42 in terms of how this experiment that has been going on for a number of years addresses some of these wants or requests by the students.
Sure, thank you, Anamanta. Very pleased to be here. I'm deeply sorry for all the teachers we have today in the audience, because, well, in 42 we did completely remove the teacher, actually. So what is 42? It's an information technology school and also a digital school, because we are learning ICT, but we are also using ICT to support our pedagogical model. We are in higher education. Our students are 18 years old plus. And we train them to bring them to the labor market, which is in deep need. Are not facing teachers. There is no lectures. We do not have any kind of video or MOOCs. And our students are facing software development challenges. We ask them to code a piece of software. So they will spend most of their time coding programs. We ask them to code. To do so, their job will be to collect information, to filter this information, because there is a lot of information available online, and then to try to figure out which one is true, which one is false, which one is obsolete, because in ICT things are evolving very fast, and which one is relevant and will help them to produce the piece of software we ask. Usually they can't do this alone. So that's why our pedagogical model is called peer learning, because our students will need to debate and to exchange with each other. It can be an individual project. They always need to debate and to talk outside their own group. They need this collaboration. Unfortunately, in a lot of, at least French school, in primary school, in high school, it's still called cheating. So it's a little bit strange for them at the beginning. They need to debate, they need to exchange on how they understand the project, how they think they can solve this project, and hopefully this will create some collective intelligence. New hypotheses will be brought and then tested by every student. When a project is over, well, we have the peer evaluation system. Every student will be graded by usually 5 other students inside the community. And if the project is a failure, the students will need to get and start the same project again. If it's a success, it unlocks the next project inside the curriculum. All the curriculum works just like a giant video game. We were talking about playing this morning. Definitely, we want our students to play in School 42, to play our curriculum. We have experience points, we have levels, we have badges, and every student is progressing on the curriculum at its own pace, on its own path, defining its own profile at the end of the curriculum. We have a school that is completely free for the students and with no degree requirement, because we want to detect ICT talent regardless the school background and regardless the social background. We think it's very important because in France, getting a quality ICT training usually costs a lot of money. So we want definitely to attract everyone who has this IT talent, and then maybe to reveal during the selection process, to reveal this talent, and then to bring them to the labor market. But not just into the labor market with technical skills. We want our students to have a sustainable career, and this is something that is deeply connected to all the soft skills, to all the social and emotional skills. Technical skills will be obsolete in 5 years, in 10 years. And definitely, we need to have our students that will develop some problem-solving skills, collaboration skills, creativity, critical thinking, self-learning to ensure a lifelong learning and so a sustainable career. We think that is very important. And in a bigger point of view, I would say that creativity also is something that is very important for us, because when in a decade, when robotics will probably handle a lot of... yes, Ananda.
So I don't want you to give them everything on one go. Keep,
Sure.
keep some of them for later.
Okay, I've got plenty of it. Okay.
So I heard a couple of very interesting terms that you said: no teachers, no lectures.
That's right.
The main focus was on coding, so no subjects, is primarily teaching coding. Is that right?
We have challenges. Students need to create a piece of software.
All right. So
And we provide the challenges.
So it's project-based,
Yes.
and the way you move is there no assessments in the traditional sense, but once the project is successful, you go to the next level.
Yes, with peer evaluation.
And very unstructured.
And very?
Unstructured. In a sense, it's not as structured and regimented as in a traditional school.
Yes, because they have the freedom of pace and path. So each student will choose its own curriculum.
Okay. They choose their own curriculums. So that's an interesting concept. Kimberly, no teachers. No lecturers. You do a lot of teacher training. You focus a lot on social and emotional learning for teachers. How do you feel about no teachers? I actually am quite excited when he said no teachers. Most of my experience with my teachers is I still wake up with cold sweat. So convince me otherwise.
Okay. So I have been working in teacher preparation for a couple of decades, and also was a teacher myself. I taught high school and middle school. Also, I taught a lot of students with problems who had a lot of challenges in themselves. And there's a couple of things just about the research that really is showing about the importance of teachers. So there's an area of research called resiliency. Risk and resiliency. And resiliency research is basically how do children and adults actually overcome adversity? What are the factors that help them be successful, contribute to their thriving and flourishing? And the most significant finding from all of that research, 5 decades actually, is to show that an important adult, having one important adult who believes in you, that you'll be a success, who's supportive. And the research really now finds that, especially in schools, it's a teacher who is that important adult who can be the one who helps you be successful. And it isn't so much just about the teaching and learning, but it's about feeling that ability to have a sense of confidence and agency. Now, what we see is what's happening with the no teacher thing, I have to say, is because, as we heard from the children here, that sometimes teachers get stressed. I just wonder if any of the teachers in this room have ever felt stress. Anybody? No? So think about this idea of stress, and I think that so much of our system is not taking care of the teachers. And so the research is really showing us now that if you take care of the teachers, you benefit the students. So a study that we did a few years ago, a colleague and I at the University of British Columbia, where I'm located, did a study on stress contagion in the classroom. And to look at this, we looked at children ages 10 to 14 classrooms, and we had their teachers fill out a measure of stress and burnout. So the teachers had to say how stressed and burnt out. Burnt out is kind of like feeling like you aren't very satisfied with your job. And for the children, to get at their stress physiology, we actually collected their cortisol, which means it's a stress hormone. So cortisol is a stress hormone. We all have cortisol. It peaks about a half an hour after awakening, and it declines the rest of the day. If it's very, very high, it indicates high levels of stress. Now, how you get cortisol is through saliva. And so to collect this study, yes, we did collect the spit from these students. And just so you know, children love giving you spit. I don't know if it would be true here in India. The kids loved it. But what was fascinating is that we found that those classrooms in which the teachers reported the highest levels of stress and burnout had the students with the highest levels of cortisol, indicating their high levels of stress. So I think in terms of the classroom, you can't, you have to look at, if you're going to help influence it, to help the teachers as well as helping the students. So I think that that's a big factor. And the other thing is very interesting here, we know, is teacher preparation. How are teachers actually adequately prepared to deal with the high levels of stress that students come into their classrooms and to affect their learning? And that stress contagion, because it could be that teachers are actually just getting all the stress from the students. So I think that if you think about teachers, first, number one, their importance in being I love the term, instead of the sage on the stage, the guide by the side. So this idea of how that adult is a mentor and helping scaffold the learning instead of being there just talking.
Okay, so it seems like from what I heard, is just about a different role for the teacher from the traditional, which the kids were kind of complaining about, where they stand in front of the class, provide the sermon, and you just listen and sort of retrain in a different role, as a mentorship, as a guide. So here comes, let's see what the group from the AI industry has to say. Yvonne, you're working with Squirrel and has come up with a system where you have bots, if I can use the word bots, or tutors that are able to guide the student, looking at all their track records, where they're having a problem. And one of the real challenges for teachers is that they have a classroom of 30 to 40 students, and trying to provide the kind of individualized attention that Kimberly is alluding to might not be practically possible. So my question is, can AI replace teachers?
This is a very critical question. I would say...
Just be careful, the teachers are on this side of the aisle.
I would say through AI program, using AI algorithm and adaptive learning, we can provide a very personalized learning program for the students to meet their individual students' needs. And even though we can do without teachers in class, but we don't encourage to do the class without teachers, which we think that human parts are still very, very important. I have to emphasize this part. through collaboration with AI teachers and human teachers and the students in class, actually we can learn in different way, in different perspective. So by using AI, approach, actually we can be more effective or more efficient in learning. But however, the teacher's role in class might or can be switched to pay more attention to students' emotional quotient, attention span, their classroom behavior, and everything about students himself. So I would say taking care of children's feelings and emotions are very, very important, because in an AI classroom, it's not robotic, it's not what we call like a code. Actually, we need warmth. We need to have more empathy for the students, to cultivate the students to know about life. It's not about learning itself only. It's about life. We're learning all subjects in order to discover in depth about life. So this is what I think.
So you're telling me you can't, you don't want to replace teachers?
No.
All right.
Teachers are irreplaceable.
I should have moved you to the other side. But the role of the teacher, you have suggested a very different role, a very traditional, a radical different approach, because you're talking about teachers becoming actually mentors, like what Kimberly was mentioning, but with that, the training on social-emotional learning, because if they're going to try to teach kids on those emotional quotients, as you mentioned, then they have to be trained as well. But you're sort of saying for the cognitive part, AI can do a relatively better job.
Talking about knowledge points, yes.
Knowledge, so, okay. Stuart, you're the science advisor. You have now this knowledge that teachers are not irreplaceable, but teachers have to be retrained in a totally different field. And my question to you is, so what do you say when you go to your minister as a science advisor in terms of teacher training, student preparation, curriculum development, because AI seems to be doing a better job on the knowledge transfer?
First, let me say in answer to Kimberly's question, I'm really stressed, primarily because I got the time wrong for this session, so my apologies for coming in late. My answer to that question sort of comes to some research that I'm very familiar with in the context of New Zealand, and it's research, experimental studies of highly effective teachers in digital classrooms. So these are classrooms that have ubiquitous access to digital tools 24/7, and the teachers are highly skilled in using the tools. But the most effective teachers in those contexts become even more important. So not just irreplaceable, but also more teaching, if you like. And I'll try and explain what I mean by that. Highly effective teachers use the digital tools to curate knowledge, content, highly motivating activities that might be digitally based, and that frees them up to do what some of my colleagues call what is quintessentially human. That is interacting on a human level with empathy, with compassion, but most importantly, in terms of some of the work that we're doing in New Zealand, being able to engage in extended discussions with children. I heard the children say this morning, or at least I interpreted them as saying, in one respect, what they wanted was teachers to not be traditional teachers, as you said, Anantha, but wanting teachers to be interactive, be able to understand things from their point of view, to be able to personalize the interactions in a way that meant that they felt valued and they were able to make more sense of the activities. So one answer, the first part of the answer to your question is, I know what I need to tell the minister. And what I know the minister needs to know, and I've told him this, is that we need to be able to train our teachers to capitalize on the opportunities that the digital tools create for being more humanistic. And what does that mean in terms of initial teacher education? It means something to do with the selection into initial teacher education for those skills. It means something in terms of the preparation of those teachers in real-world, everyday classrooms in which they can practice those skills.
So it seems convergence is happening. A matter of a hybrid system of using technology, but still a very important role for teachers, but a new role for teachers, more personal interaction so that they don't they're more kind to the students, which is what the kids were requesting, not to be so impatient. Let the machines handle that more difficult in terms of the interventions on the knowledge acquisition. All right. Now, I want to talk about the devil in the room. And the devil in the room is the policy making community. What I find, and is a big disconnect, is when I go to conferences such as these, and other conferences where educators, academics working in this field, practitioners, and I was one in Chicago, the kind invitation of Kimberly here in the Cassell Foundation, very similar messages were coming out along the lines that we are talking about today. But then when I go into a conference where the government representatives are there around the table, they're negotiating education policies, and that includes even culprits like the international organizations like UNESCO, the World Bank, the OECD and stuff. Nobody talks about this. It's about strengthening the system that we have. They talk about improving the quality of the system that we have. We are talking about making it more inclusive, but the system that we have. But nobody's talking about the system that we have needs to be changed. So, oxymoronically, we are going to be trying to improve the quality of a bad quality system. A tongue twister, but interesting to mull over. So, why is this? And I'm going to reverse it because you basically are the science advisor to the Minister of Education. What's the reason for this disconnect? Is it because politics takes over? Is it because of social, cultural factors that take over? Or why is not, and you talked about science and evidence base, and there seems to be so much of science and evidence base to support what we are talking about today, and yet policy seems to be lagging behind.
To be honest, I don't, and I can only really speak for my own country, I don't see policy as lagging behind. In my country, I think the policymakers are aware of the sorts of futures that are present that we've been describing here. I think there are issues on both sides. On the side of the policymakers, it's creating the right conditions for enabling the sorts of things we want to take place. They're aware of them. They can write statements, strategy statements, policy statements, but they need to create conditions. For example, the ITE, the initial teacher education that we were talking about, is a condition for enabling the sorts of things we want to take place. But there are also faults on our side. The evidence, the science evidence side. If I can personalize this for a minute, my minister constantly asks me, why is it that research scientists can't disseminate their information adequately well enough to be able to make a difference to the everyday, moment-by-moment practices that teachers engage with. And I think that's on us, that's on me. I'm not able to, or my colleagues and I have not been able to use our evidence in a way that makes a very specific, practical difference in the classroom. That would be my answer.
Okay, so it seems like it's much better in New Zealand, as in maybe in many other countries. You think, I just want a quick follow-up. So the science policy nexus seems to be working pretty well in New Zealand.
I would say that the nexus is good, but it's, I think I'm trying to describe this more in terms of a triangulation. So the policy research part of this is one side of the triangle, but the other side of the triangle is what happens in schools and classrooms. And I think what I'm saying is that, and I said this at lunchtime, so I should say it again, quite a lot of our research can be irrelevant. And what a personal mission that I have is to try and promote the research that actually deals with everyday issues in classrooms, that if we can set the policy levers right, will enable teachers to do what they do well.
Right. So you hit on the triangulation, science, policy, implementation. Kimberly, you have been working very closely with the British Columbian, can I use British Columbian? I never heard it though.
British Columbia, yes.
Yeah, because then I go to Columbia. So
No,
British
British
Columbia
Columbia.
government in mainstreaming SEL, how successful has that been across the board in terms of curriculum revision, teacher training, and then policies on assessments and policies on school educational planning? The reason I ask this is where MGIP did a policy review in the Asia Pacific countries, and they found that there was a total dichotomy between policies that were focusing on education for sustainable development, global citizenship, which has a lot of the pro-social skills, but yet when it came on policy on assessments and policy on curriculums and policy on teacher training, none of them were speaking to each other. In fact, in many cases, they were orthogonal. So how does that relate with your experience in British Columbia?
Yeah, so in British Columbia, Canada, we in 2016 legislated social and emotional learning as part of the K-12 curriculum. And that was quite a landmark change in the sense of having an explicit attention to social and emotional learning. And I want to go back to something Stuart was saying. I think that the really important one is in terms of the policy is a sense of trust and relationships. That I work closely with our ministry, as do other professors at universities across British Columbia. And I would say that one of the levers of change and kind of what's happened is it was the policymakers working closely with the research scientists. And two things. First of all, the research scientists could talk in a language that the policymakers understood. So I have to say that, because most academics don't talk, so it makes very much sense for the research, right? And the other one, there was a sense of trust. Like it really was about relationships and that relational trust notion that we talk about. Tony Breik and Barbara Schneider have done some research on this importance of relational trust. So I think now what's happening in BC, we've kind of had these 5 forces for change, I think, that led to this real integration. One being the policy change, one being this collaboration and trust, everyone included between a university system, the teachers, the teacher unions, as well as the government. Third, it was integrated into teacher preparation. And I think this is another really key point where these changes that were legislated now became part of teacher preparation and professional development. The fourth one was really about assessment. And so the assessments that we have now, we minimize the standardized achievement testing and also have assessments of really one of the biggest measures we use across British Columbia at different grade levels is on child well-being. It's not on how academically they are, it's how well are the children doing, how happy, how healthy, And that's one. And then also the system-wide changes. So when you're integrating something, and this is really what's happened quite a lot in BC schools, a system-level change where the focus is not just on giving the children the SEL skills, the focus is also on the teachers' social and emotional well-being. So there's a lot of intentional efforts and paying attention to promoting teachers' social emotional competence. And finally, the learning context. So one of the biggest things that's happened recently is how important it is to change discipline approaches to child misbehavior in schools. So what aligns with a social emotional learning perspective is more about restorative practices than about punitive discipline. So that's just one. And I think the other one is really the professional development isn't just for the teachers, it's for the leaders, both the school administrators, superintendents, and all of that. So we're really trying to take a very systemic approach. Now, how successful is it? We don't know yet, really, but I would say that you could walk into any school in British Columbia and say, what are you doing around social emotional learning, promoting children's well-being, and they would tell you about several things. So no one would look at you and just shrug their shoulders.
Thank you. So my question to the teachers in the audience, how many of you know about the term social and emotional learning? How many of you been trained in social and emotional learning? Okay. Not bad. So we have some hope. Great. Olivier. School 42. Very radical, very different. France, quite structured with the educational policy. How do you navigate that landscape? How do they provide you the freedom to do what you want to do? And is there any kind of a relationship with the ministry and the policymakers?
Well, 42 is a private school with private funds, so definitely we have a complete freedom regarding the pedagogical model. We do have relationships with the Ministry of Education. They are interested in what we are doing. I believe it's because the school is free for the students, so there is no business-oriented stuff in the school. That's why I think they can have a chat with us. And from the contact we've got with the French ministry, we thought that in general, the politicians, people who are changing every 5 years usually, and also the head of the Ministry of Education, who remains across the different political elections, but they are pretty open to diversity in education. And what they told us is that unfortunately, it's mainly on the, I would say, at the ground level, where there is some difficulties to make some changes. I believe it's partially because of lack of trust. Kimberly, you said it's lack of trust between this elite of French administration and probably the whole group of teachers. I think that also, well, maybe you're aware about the huge strike we have right now in France. Well, I would say that basically French are kind of schizophrenic. They are electing people to make some reforms, to change stuff. Today it's about retirement, but it have been for education as well in the previous years. And as soon as you try to change something, because you were elected for that as a politician, well, you have this kind of strike. So it's always a little bit complicated on a cultural point of view. And indeed, to have this freedom, we were able to make a lot of pedagogical experiments to try stuff, what is working, what is not working. 42 have been created 6 years ago, and we already made 3 major changes. At first, there was no freedom of pace during the curriculum. We had this the second year. We had no gamification at first. We had this during this third year, and so on. We are always trying to keep this flexibility, and we want to develop an agile state of mind for our students, and we also try to ourselves have an agile state of mind. And unfortunately, public education is stuck in this unique model, and it's alimenting, no, I'm just trying to find the right word in English, sorry, is self-sustainable. This model is self-sustainable and kind of disconnected from what is happening in society. So it's unfortunately very difficult to make some change in education in France. And I'm talking either as higher education, because 42 is in higher education, but it's my belief also in a regular K-12 education.
A very quick follow-up question. Are you constrained by the overall national education policy that you must adhere to?
Only administrative constraint. As a school in higher education, we have to be officially open, but it's a kind of administrative record. And we have no constraint regarding the pedagogy, the curriculum itself. But we do not have any state homologation. That's the counterpart.
Thank you. Yvonne, coming back to you're operating in a country as large as India. You're running with the dynamics of such a large number of students. Also, a very large, I guess, bureaucracy as well in the education sector. How has policy embraced AI and technology and implementing it in schools? I know now AI is a required course in schools.
Yes.
And they started a very young, but that's a course in schools. But using AI within the schooling system, how has that worked with the policymakers?
Right now, from my understanding, and the current, because I'm not government unit, so we're a private sector. Right now, we have about 2,400 learning centers nationwide. So we have a huge amount of students using the system right now. And the government is quite supported. I mean, like, you know, either in like experiment program in public schools, or talking about like promoting AI concept in everywhere. Actually, in China, you can say the concept or the recognition or about AI actually is more and more popular. We know that we need it. And the reason why is that we want to solve some problems that we confront with along the road for the past maybe many years. One is the lack of teachers, not to mention good teachers. It's very challenging to duplicate so-called good teachers. In China, actually in one class, traditional class, it's about 1 to 40 students, up to, in suburban area, it's about 1 to 80 students, 80 students in one class. It's very challenging to the teachers. So using AI algorithm and adaptive learning approach, actually we can solve this problem to make learning easier and also make teaching even easier. The second problem that we confront with is that, you know, with very few resources, actually in places like in Tibet, Mongolia, in the past, actually, it's hardly you can build learning centers over there because not too many teachers will go there and teach. So by using AI system, actually, we can solve this problem. One more is about the increasing performance. sometimes when we talk about, efficiency and effectiveness for learning, thinking about if we can save 1/3 of the time or 2/3 of the time, but still have the same or better learning result, what the class will look like. Yeah. So we're thinking about maybe the students and the teachers can have more time for some of the things in life. Yeah. So we don't have to spend most of the time keep repeating all of the knowledge points that we have already mastered. We don't waste time. So everyone is unique and different. So we're thinking about every student's, not a single student, not two students have the similar learning path or learning content. So by using the AI algorithm and adaptive learning approach, so we can provide them really personalized learning content, so each student can learn what they need or what they want at their own pace. That's what we expect.
So has there been a modification of the teacher training program to start training teachers on social and emotional learning competencies to complement the intrusion of AI into the education?
I think so, yeah. Because the change, bring into our class, so the requirements or what we demand from the teachers will be very different from the past, yeah.
So they recognize that. Any response to the use of AI in the schooling systems because of the different environments in terms of data, ownership, generation, privacy laws?
There are quite a few issues to do with data ownership and control of data that arise from the use of AI. I can only mention a few of them here, and we can spend some time, perhaps if we're chatting at the end of the day in that 5:30 slot to extend this. So one of the issues is whether students own their data, and at what point and what developmental point perhaps for students might they own their own data. And again, the New Zealand government has asked some of us to make some judgments about this and provide some advice. There is another issue that is coming up in our context, which is coming from families, because the families are saying that not AI in this instance, but digital technology is enabling the archiving of all sorts of information from their children. But mostly the parents are telling us that all they have access to are the events, what's coming up in the school calendar, the field trip or whatever. And the parents are saying, we want access to children's information, how well they're doing. We need to know about their achievement patterns and their well-being and other aspects that the schools might be collecting. So there are a whole pile of issues about data ownership, which are not just protection of the data, but it's seriously about the ownership of the various actors in the system. Okay, thank you very much. I have about 5-7 minutes, so I'm just wondering if we open up to maybe maximum 3 questions. Whoever puts their hands up first. 1, 2, 3. And beyond 3, we can negotiate a price. All right. I think I saw somewhere here. I forget who it was.
Good afternoon to the panel. I am from AP.
One stipulation, you got to make that question straight to the point.
Yes.
And if you want to direct it to any of the panelists, please do so. Or if it is for all 3 of them, please say so.
It's for all. Basically, I am from AP. Recently, we are joining in the curriculum department. And our AP government is successfully implementing this happiness curriculum. With this, there is a lot of change among the students, and we are quite happy. But when in terms of technology, integrating technology, there is a big hurdle for all of us. Recently, I was a part of that, and I want to introduce technology as a theme in the curriculum. But most of the officials oppose that. It can't be reached up to the level of all the students, up to the rural area. And how can we use this? This is my question. How can we address this? Technology is not in a position to reach to the rural level of all of our students. And how can we integrate this? In terms of emotional area, and we are quite happy with that, through Ananda Vedika, happiness curriculum, our students are enjoying a lot. And in terms of technology, I have a question. Can we integrate it or not? And can we take it up to the rural level of the children or not?
Okay. I'll ask any one of the three panelists. But my counter question is that the children that we had this morning are all from Andhra, and they seem to be having a different perspective on the issues with education. So it'll be interesting to sort of see if there's a system to see how successful the happiness program is. Is there a system to evaluate when you started, to do some kind of an assessment of where they are, and then within a year or 6 months to see if there was any actual change in a very systematic manner? Is that built into the system?
That we are implementing in government schools and that curriculum.
Okay. Anything on the technology? I think it's more of, based on my 5 years in India and talking with the ministry at the central, and even with some discussions with the AP government, I think there is, as the collector, I think that's how they call them, the collector who was here this morning. One of the biggest focus of the new government is on infrastructure. And I think part of that infrastructure is providing the internet accessibility. I know at the central level, the government is thinking about, and I think the Prime Minister has a whole strategy of connecting the whole country. It's part of their plans. So I think one should think about how is it going to evolve over the next 5 years, and it will happen. And in the process, trying to get the students ready when it comes. So you can also do a lot of things offline, and you don't always need to be connected online. There have been experiences where things are done offline, they're captured, and then at periodical intervals, they're connected to the net, and everything is uploaded and back. So there are ways of doing that till the time when the country is completely connected. Has anybody faced any similar problems in their respective in terms of the infrastructure, internet connectivities?
You mean internet access in small classes?
In rural areas where the connectivity is a little bit of a problem.
Well, usually our primary school and high school are definitely connected. Not everyone is, I think, fully using all the potential of digital learning. But it's more my experience as a father of 2 children that is telling me what I've seen in my own city.
Okay. There was one question here. Let me go this and that gentleman over there.
Yeah, I'm Professor V. Valli Kumari from Andhra University, Visakapatnam. Well, my question is for Kimberly. You were mentioning relational trust. So I would like to know, because trust is subjective. How are you quantifying trust for artificial intelligence? How are you quantifying trust? Trust, because it is subjective in nature. So you can't map them to numbers. So when you're running artificial intelligence algorithms, AI algorithms, how are you quantifying trust?
That's a great question. I mean, I think there's actually a measure of relational trust called that's used in Chicago Public Schools that Tony Breik helped develop, called the 5 Essentials of Relational Trust. So they actually do have a way that they have quantified what relational trust looks like in a school in terms of connections between both the principal and the teachers and the students, the parents, with the principal and with the teachers. So there is a way that they have quantified it. I think maybe what you're getting at is how do you promote it, you know, because it is a subjective thing whether you can trust this other person. And you know, this is where I keep on getting to how do you cultivate positive relationships? That's actually a part of social emotional learning. Because to me, relationships are about trust, be able to collaborate and to be able to cooperate and to have empathy. That's all takes trusting relationships. So I think it's a very good question, and I think we need more data to actually figure out how to do that.
Thank you. Can you, the gentleman right at the back?
Thank you. Professor Kabale, I have another question for you. So I'm taking it a notch up higher from K-12 education to university education. So I come from IIT Kanpur, which is a university in the north. And I lead a mental health initiative out there. And during my tenure, a lot of students committed suicide. During this entire course of generation, if higher education institutes do want to stay relevant, the information is abundantly available, training is always on demand. We need to think about how higher education has been contributing to this next generation of development. In terms of, are we able to raise critical thinkers? Are we able to build up coursework which teaches us how to deal with failures? Does it teach how to nurture love? How to build meaningful relationships? And in this particular, because most importantly, before we answer any other questions for the mankind, most important is to figure out the answer for why is it that we have to live at all. And have there been efforts at University of British Columbia or in a higher education institute at other places where you have visited, where they have tried to develop a curriculum for it? I understand that there is a push now, and there is a lot of people are understanding importance of that. It's very important to have a social emotional angle to a learning. But has there been a really effective curriculum development per se?
I was just going to answer yes. So Richie Davidson, who was here this morning, Richie at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Robert Roser at Penn State University, and David Germano at University of Virginia have developed a course in which for undergraduates called the Art and Science of Human Flourishing. And it's a course now that's available to all first-year students that's all about cultivating your own well-being using all those both contemplative approaches, but really is focused particularly, they have, it's just in its second year, and they're collecting data now on the students' experiences. So that's the first, I mean, I'm sure there's many other examples, but I know that that's one in which it's really informed from the science of human flourishing, and also they're doing research to find out how it benefits. But I totally agree with you, this idea, how do we integrate that idea of being becoming human being into the undergraduate curriculum in post-secondary?
Yeah, that's a great question. The only bits I would add to what Kimberly has said, at my university we have a graduate profile, so irrespective of the faculty, every graduate with a first degree from my institution is expected to have a set of skills and competencies, and some social and emotional skills are identified there. I have to say, we don't measure that, and there's very little accountability for that, but nevertheless there is a commitment. The second thing I would say, it's a little bit like the question about trust. How do you build relationships and trust? I know that the first stage in building those relationships is to set a set of norms and values associated with your vision. And we are currently doing that at my university because we've had to do it because of a terrible event that happened in New Zealand. And we're developing protocols around hate speech, protocols around social inclusion that in fact we will want students to sign up to.
Okay, I think we've kind of run over time. Thank you very much. I'm not going to try to summarize this discussions other than the fact that I think I might. Now when I think about it, I want to make a couple of things. One is listen to the children. I think the science to policy to implementation nexus has to be strengthened in most countries, and not just science to policy, but to the implementation and to decentralize policy if one is possible, and the whole notion of assessments to be based on a continuous assessment, and the role of AI and humans as a new relationship within the education system. With that, I want to thank my panelists. No sparring gloves were brought out. We'll try next year. But again, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your views with us. Can we give a round of applause to you? And if you have questions for them, they will be available at the Amma session. I like that. They should have an Appa session, but they only, apparently everything is mothered in this whole conference so far. But they have Ask Me Anything session from 5:30 to 6:30, and the panelists will be there. So those who had their hands up, I apologize for not giving the floor to you, but you have that opportunity at 5:30. Thank you much.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay with us. There's an exciting session coming up. We have Harry Kitamo, and I'll shortly introduce you in a while. For the question on how do we integrate SEL in curriculum, there's someone who asked that question, how do we integrate SEL in curriculum? We will have catalytic session 4 tomorrow, and probably you can find some of your answers there. We are also at the Institute trying to do that. We have been able to create some of our programs which are very much aligned to the idea of embedding SEL in textbooks and in mainstreaming them, as well as keeping them in an isolated chunk. So please feel to have more conversations around that. And again, a reminder, if you have questions, and I could see that there were plenty of questions in the room, feel free to reach out to the speakers during the AMS session, Ask Me Anything session, which is 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. today in the evening. It's every day in the evening at the same time, right behind us, next to the choral room. So keeping the pace ahead, because I know some of the conversation was around artificial intelligence in education and individualized learning too. So we have with us Dr. Harry Kitamo, who will be talking on personalized learning analytics, dreams and reality. Harry has over 20 years of experience in learning sciences and artificial intelligence. Currently, he's the founder and chairman of HEDI, a job tech company solving global talent mismatch and workforce reskilling challenges with AI. That sounds quite exciting. So, ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause, let's welcome Harry.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be back in Visak. I'm Harri Ketamo, founder of HEDI, and we are research company developing predictive analytics on economics, defense, investments, labor markets, and lifelong learning. And today, besides the fly is bothering me, besides that, hey, by the way, clicker. Besides that, I want to have a clicker. But today, we are focusing on the subset of our work, namely learning analytics. And because that's a subset, I will open the topic a bit more detail. So not only what can we do, thank you, but also what kind of challenges we would face when doing analytics. And the dreams. Yes, there has been dreams on automatized learning for 200 years. This is from early 1900-something, where the artist figured out that, okay, the future of learning could be something like this, that the guy is crunching the books and the knowledge automatically flows into brains. Well, it's dream, not reality even now. But let's start from illusion of intelligence. So, what happens? I think most of you are familiar with this game. Who don't know Pac-Man? Feel free to raise hand because I'm not asking anything, just want to make a poll. Okay, everybody knows. Most likely, you get an impression that those 4 ghosts trying to catch you, they are playing a teamwork. But in real life, they are 4 very simple behaviors. One ghost is just following you. One ghost is all the time avoiding you, so being away from you. One ghost is always turning right, and one ghost is doing attacks towards you and then backing up. And these 4 behaviors together creates an illusion of intelligent group behavior, even though they are 4 completely different behaviors. And this is pretty much what we are doing with all the AI. Not saying that everything is gameplay or simple, but we are using single behavior, the fly really is annoying. the single behaviors that altogether creates an, illusion of human-like intelligence, even though we know they are just behaviors. In learning, we quite often face up into example that, hey, can we do this kind of analytics like they do in Amazon? Now once again a poll, who knows the Amazon shop at the internet? Okay, I think most of you knows. There is a suggestion where somebody buys a product and a suggestion that if somebody buys this product, they have also bought this and this and this product. And because Amazon sells well with this kind of suggestions, that based on somebody's actions, let's suggest something. We tend to think that that's okay also in learning. So if somebody has read this content, and it has read the content number 2, then number 2 must be important. But that's just dream. Because what happens if you have a course about geography? And a couple of first participants in your course are Flat Earth Society members. So the Flat Earth Society thinks that the Earth is still flat. So not modern geography, not from latest 500 years, but they still think it's a flat. Okay, they think Earth is flat, and they follow Flat Earth Society things like Earth-centric world. What happens to your course if you use Amazon-like suggestions that people who have taken this action would suggest you the following action? Yes, your course is ruined. And this is a core in learning analytics. We can't put analytics, nor we can't produce adaptive learning just based on that somebody somewhere has thought that this might work. We all the time need evidence-based, and the evidence quite often is related to science. And what comes to science in adaptive learning, it's more than 100 years old. In fact, in 1912 was the first ideas about adaptive learning set out by Edward Thorndike. So we have a long history on adaptive learning and learning analytics. Nothing comes from empty. There is always a history. And this is also same goes to learning analytics. If somebody says, hey, I figured out that this is great and it changed the world, first question is that, do you have empirical evidence on this? If no, then there is no empirical evidence. And that's pretty much it, because the science is old. When it comes to learning, I think most important thing we have to find out is a zone of proximal development. Zone of proximal development is a concept introduced by Vygotsky in early 90s. And the idea is that you are learning when you have to work in the upper limit of your current capacity. So your skills and the challenge of the activity must be in balance, and you have to somehow be in the upper limit of your current skills. Then you really can learn something. And this is very important to understand when doing learning analytics or adaptive learning, because it's useless to do something that is easy for me. For example, if 6th grader is doing 1st grade mathematics, we'll get really frustrated because it's too simple. And vice versa. If 1st grade kid have to do 6th grade mathematics, can't figure out anything about the topic, and we'll get, once again, either frustrated or scared. But anyway, we have to find a balance between current skills and the challenge of the task. And that's no matter if we call it learning analytics or adaptive learning, this is the core. Otherwise, we don't take the maximum out of the technology. Several years ago, with my previous team, we did a very interesting experiment with our, that time, game AI. We construct a game where kids could teach the game characters what mathematics, sciences, music, geography, biology, well, most of the topics. And the biggest thing was that they could teach whatever they want, either correct way or wrong way. The teaching was simple. They did it with interface in the classroom. They have to evaluate the character behavior. And finally, the character was sent to compete against other characters or perform certain tasks. And yes, with that method, we could collect really good data about learners. Because when you are teaching the game character, you re-represent your thinking processes, like what is related to what I think in this situation, what kind of feedback I give to my character. And this all together gives us a very detailed understanding about the thinking structure of the learner. So we get very good analytics. We could point out zone of proximal development, so where my skills and challenges are in balance, and we could keep the kids in zone of proximal development. We could also point out the conceptual chains from learning theory's point of view, the critical point where I have to accept that something, what I was previously taught was wrong, and now I have to think differently. We could also point out that. But from learning analytic point of view, most important finding is that when the game world was open, so the kids could teach even dumb characters that always fail, always do the wrong stuff, never correct. Quite big portion of the kids teach dumb characters. And that was fun, because at the classroom, they were laughing that my character is dummier than yours. My character has never done single correct answers. And if at some point someone's character do a correct answer, they can say that I have to go teaching more my character, I have to make it more and more dummier. Sounds stupid, and at the first place, most of teachers will say that if we get the data from this kind of gameplay, and there is a player who has taught a character that is really dumb, there is something wrong with the kid, right? But in the real world, those who taught the dummiest possible characters, they learned most, because they had to do more work than anyone else. They had to first understand what is the correct answer, what is the correct way to do, then convert it to wrong way and teach it in the wrong way, give a feedback in a wrong way, so they really did double or triple work compared to those who just taught the characters. We didn't figure that out in advance. We saw it from the data because there was a lot of, let's say, skewness in the data because of those players who taught dumb characters, and dumb with really good performance. And that's why if we would have set limits on advance that, okay, if this kind of structure good, if this kind of structure bad, we would have doomed very many really good, clever kids as a bad learners because they played the game differently. And in generalized way, we have to understand the data. We have to have real-world evidence before we can say anything about learning in real world. All the stuff that has somebody figured out somewhere is worth of nothing without empirical evidence. Okay, here is some slides, some figures what we find out. Also in the gameplay, the skills and competence might fit in the flow. Flow is more familiar from sports, meaning the same situation. But this is also analytic point of view. We can measure different kind of phenomena with similar kind of variables, like skills, competence against challenge. We can also measure flow at some extent. But I think from learning point of view, zone of proximal development is the important one. We can try to estimate zone of proximal development even from the fuzzy materials, from the big data. And for that, we have built a mechanism where we can approximate that, okay, somebody can do something, can't do something, or is somewhere in between, so might be in the zone of proximal development. And in first grade mathematics, it could be looking something like this. We have a map about the, core concept of the first year mathematics, like numbers, number line, additions, multiplication, and so on. If we can get a data where we can show that these kids do have a good understanding on additions and number line, we can for sure predict that the easier one can be done. And when we have measures that the kid can't do multiplications, it's quite easy to predict what is the zone of proximal development. Not necessarily 100% correct. And at this point, we have to understand that this kind of analytics is for teacher, because then teacher can come in and start to do interventions based on teachers and machines understanding what we can do. So empowering teacher. In a real world, we are using this in labor market, lifelong learning activities, done really big samples. And the idea is that we first establish an understanding about labor market by reading job ads, curriculums, economic news, different kind of forecast reports, and build a model what kind of skills are needed in the work life, how they are connected to each other. And then we start to crunch individuals' data, like my previous job descriptions, my learnings, like what courses I have had, what kind of hobbies I have had, build my own profile, so my skills compared to work life. This is an interface where we can put data in, so feed in courses, feed in my CV, my previous job descriptions, my hobbies, and so on. So feeding data. And based on the data, the algorithms crunches my profile. So the concepts and the connections between the concepts, what I know. This is like a knowledge graph in adaptive learning, or you can imagine it like a mind map, if mind map as a concept is familiar. But anyway, core concepts of my learning and their relations. And what kind of challenge, and based on that profile, we can suggest, for example, for me, jobs that fits perfectly for me, courses that could make my profile better. And also from this job ad, we can say that that fits quite perfectly for my profile, but still we can list concepts that I should learn in order to do better in this job. In many cases, I might have those skills, but I have never mentioned such skills in any documents. But anyway, we can make things visible with this kind of modeling. But the challenges, yes, there are great challenges on this kind of modeling. First of all, we have to have a really good background model on the skills demand. So what words are used in what context and what they do mean. Very challenging for people, even more challenging for machine. Once again, requires lots of empirical evidence before we can trust this kind of language models. So the first model, quite rarely, is not the best model. The second challenge is people. When you can say your skills, and if it can help you in getting the next job, people tend to not necessarily lie, but saying a bit more what is a, let's say, reliable level, and how to make that sure, and vice versa. How we can make sure these kind of systems don't discriminate some people. We did an experiment with the same method when assessing the skills. The assessing the skills is the next part, and the assessing the skills is also maybe the most critical part. So let's go to there. The same algorithm that builds the labor market understanding can build also knowledge graph for adaptive learning. We let it read machine learning journals. So it learns what topics are important, how they are related to each other, and what kind of neighborhood is for every concept. And based on this model, we did a sort of gamified quiz where you can just, the AI or algorithm, how we call it, ask questions that which of the following concepts are related to one concept? And then you just check that is related, is not related, not related. And this is, this is multiple choice question. But in the real world, you are drawing your mind map. Basically, drawing your mind map for AI, how you think the bigger picture is. Because when we ask for all the core concepts, these kind of questions, which of the following are related, the users draw their mind map about the topic. And then we can compare, do your mind map match the reality? And why and this is integratable into any platform, so this is from Moodle, it is in apps. Well, you can even put it in LinkedIn if you want. But why we ended up this kind of multiple choice question when at the same time we can use machine learning to get full text and compare it to other text? It's the training sets. If we want to measure your skills for a single answer on, well, let's say any domain, we should have a huge amount of correct answers, incorrect answers, and even the correct answers graded like good grades, average, poor grades, disqualified. And this requires that much of data work that we just couldn't do it. Other thing was that when we had not enough good training sets, our algorithm rejects really good answers because the writers were too good for AI to understand. They write difficult sentences with really professional words that AI didn't recognize. Or they put jokes in between, which shows, by the way, that they are really much in the topic. Or they use just other ways, sentence structure not familiar. And so the AI rejected really good answers. And outcome from the learning analytics, dreams and reality point of view, reality is, even though we dream that we can easily assess questions, it requires a lot of data science behind. And yes, there are a lot of companies that do that data science really well. A lot of universities doing that data science part really well. But what I want to highlight that if you don't have resources to do it really well, you have to understand what are the weaknesses of such system. And that's why, because our goal was to scale that assessment tool for any topic globally. It's impossible to create training sets. That's why we have to develop different kind of method, because our bigger picture is that now when I assess my skills, I start artificial intelligence course, learn the core concepts, and finally I do all the course, so it's green. Not any zone of proximal development left, because I know everything. We can easily take this model, and because the system understands how the concepts are related, I take next blockchain course. And I immediately see what I already know about blockchain. I don't have to start from the very beginning because I already know that I know these topics. My teacher knows that because this is validated score, knows that I already know this. And the zone of proximal developments, namely yellows and oranges, are those I can focus on next. And this is also for labor market, because the bigger picture is that when I do more and more courses, we can start to build models where I can predict my skills against the labor market demand. And based on our experiments, it's really easy to build the model, really easy to get matches that, okay, I know this is something. But the difficult part is trust, how we can trust it. Second difficult part is changes in language, because the words change really rapidly. Old data is old data. We need to have modern data. And I would say the biggest question is that we still should have human in the loop. There are always things where we don't have enough good training data to really do detailed decision based on only what machine tells us. In this example, there is a profile with otherwise green area with one red dot. And it's not that guy's profile, it's my own profile. So that profile, or that red dot in my profile in that green area is deep learning. I have never published anything about deep learning under name deep learning. That's why my predictive model says no deep learning. But I would say that anyone who has done data science and is familiar with neural computing and backpropagation can do it. But in predictive model, there is red. And there will be similar kind of interesting topics for anyone profiles, and that's why we should have human in the loop. Because eventually, all these kind of systems are meant to empower people. In fact, all our automation is done in order to just remove manual tasks from people. And that's also for AI is done for. But the jobs are there. There has always been jobs. There are always new jobs. But the automation is done basically to remove tasks. And we do this in order to help teachers and governments to deal with labor market shortage. So this can speed up assessment, speed up the matching between the individual education work. And when people comes in, it's time to discuss. And it's same in learning. I would say that this kind of tools help teacher to focus on teaching. AI, adaptive learning, learning analytics can help teacher on the routine type of predictable tasks like correcting exercises, grading students, let's say, typical grading based on the examines and exercises. And where teacher comes in, it's social and emotional learning. That's why I'm really happy when this morning keynote, it was told that social and emotional learning should be everywhere. Not own topic, but everywhere, because that's the future of teaching, I think. While we can automate a lot of stuff with algorithms, and I would say that for teachers are always needed. Teachership will change. And these are tools that help teachers to focus more on learners and do less routine type of work. And I think we have some time left for questions, because I also think it's important to have your view on topic. So if we have microphone, we will have 1 or 3 questions, maybe. So okay. Okay.
Then can we either, now that you've said about questions, can you just do maybe 2 questions?
Yeah. Okay, we have to catch some schedule, so 1 question. First hand back there. Okay. If we can get microphone there.
It's not going to hit anybody, it's on.
Okay, if you shout loud.
Hello? Hello. Firstly, I would like to apologize because the answer to my question was probably in the last part of your lecture, but I could not really decipher it, so here I go again. How can we teachers, say for example myself, I teach grade 8 to 12 students. I teach business studies back in Bangladesh. So how can we actually take help from this platform so that we can incorporate this thing into our teaching methods and so that the students can actually get help out of it? So I really could not understand a lot of concepts regarding this. So if you could explain this a little more in details. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good. So what I was talking right now is a platform we are now rolling out. So it's already in use in a couple of countries, for example in Finland. But like every educational technology, I think all the developers knows the pain. There are silos. There are different products that don't talk to each other. That's why one platform like ours don't solve the big challenges, where the big challenges are silos, architectural differences, and then ways how to share data, which is, by the way, very important topic because we can't share users' data how we want. And those are big, let's say, challenges we have to overcome before we can take this kind of really deep analytics in use. But I want to highlight also that we have scientific, empirical, evidence-based analytics, not only ours, but quite many. But the systematic challenges in siloed platforms makes it sometimes really difficult to use most advanced tools. And also how we share users' data, because we should consider learning data like health data. It's person's own. In some countries, it's countries, but basically it is not free trade stuff. We have to be careful with people's data. And for example, we are following My Data initiative, which is a movement that deals data in a certain way, so like how we can share the data. But as long the systems are in silos, it's very difficult for a single teacher to start to use some kind of new technologies, which is, yes, like you questioned, how you can use. It is unfortunately not that easy to take systematically in use. But it's good that everyone knows what is possible, and especially what is dream, what is reality. This is really important knowledge when you make decisions, what you use, what you don't use, and what is the future of teachership. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, for that motivational conversation. I think there's a lot to take back, even for people, and I mean, even for me who's working in a similar sector, but not with directly students or teachers. Hold on to your questions, ladies and gentlemen. We will have the AMS session, so I'm sure Harry's going to be around. Catch him there and ask more of your questions there, and I hope you get the answers that you're seeking. We now break for a short coffee and tea break, and tea and coffee will be served in right outside Coral, in the same area where you had your lunch in the evening. So see you exactly at 3:30 back again. And we'll have the last session, 3:40, is it? 3:40. Oh, I'm so sorry with the time. So can we be back by 4:10? Yeah? So 4:10, we meet back for Joanna's session on Futuro Games. Thank you. Apologies, before that we have a session by Dan Shefford and then Futuro Games by Joanna. Thank you.